Welcome to Audio Products Podcast. We are meeting with pro audio industry veterans, founders, product managers, UX designers, to learn how they build and manage the products we all love. You will get tips how to navigate your career in audio and how to develop a successful audio product. From musical instruments through audio plugins and gaming middleware up to music distribution platforms or consumer electronics like headphones, mics, and even automotive speaker systems. Enjoy. Hey, Andrew.
Good evening. Nice to see you.
How are you doing today?
Very good. Just back from AES in the US. Very good time listening to new things, meeting people. So yeah, very good.
And how was it? I mean, was it big? European conventions usually are small. I mean, they just got a little bit smaller. Is it still like a...
Yeah, I think, they alternate, I think, in the US between Los Angeles and New York. I think this year was maybe a little bit smaller than expected in Long Beach. We had a show. We had like a stand at the show showing some of our products. And we certainly had like a steady flow of people stopping and talking. So from our side, it was very positive.
Cool. Great to hear that. And, thank you. Appreciate. I know that you were just only a few days back from US, so still a little bit of jet lag. So, I really appreciate that you found time. And you see, maybe instead of me like introducing you, so maybe you can, just say a couple of words about yourself, what you do and who you are. I mean, I'm just super excited. We had these conversations before the podcast and we share the same passion. So, but before we do that, maybe if you could say...
I can do that. I'm not sure I can do it in a couple of words though. I'm quite old now.
It can be we have time, so you can
I think speak. I studied acoustics at Salford in the UK. And I think I've always had a passion around audio. Earlier in my career, I moved to Finland to work for Nokia, designing acoustics in mobile phones. So that kind of involved, simulation, testing, working on the supply chain, choosing components, all of that. And I think that was a really exciting time. And then at Nokia, really, there was a lot of opportunity to learn and move, to different disciplines. So during my time there, I worked on technology platforms, kind of developing components that were used, all across the ranges. I led teams, and then I moved into a kind of a team looking for external technology, so kind of audio technology that Nokia could partner with or buy or license. So really kind of looking towards innovation. And then I've led like quality improvement projects globally, like trying to figure out from data, what are the challenges we have, and then pull a team together and how we fix it. And then I moved into technology strategy at a component level, and then within the accessories team, I started looking at partnering, or how we partnered with CSR and Broadcom on the chipset level, and got access to key technologies. And it was an interesting time because I think realistically Nokia was on the decline there, and so I moved into partnering in accessories. So the management team asked me to lead and set up partnerships for Nokia in accessories. So I set up partnerships with Monster, doing headphones, with JBL, doing speakers with built-in wireless charging, Fatboy, like a charging cushion so your phone can be comfortable while it's charging, lots of different areas. And then I ended up leading a product team, had 2 or 3 product managers working for me, engineering, and we were developing accessories that were, going to be sold with Nokia or Microsoft phones as it was towards the end. And so it was a really interesting time. And then after Microsoft, I didn't want to move to Redmond. So I went to work for a company called Symphony. They're I think they're now the world's largest audio ODM. We worked with a lot of different brands. I think started with them in Europe and ended up leading the global sales and marketing team. We made pushes into new markets, into conferencing, into professional audio. That was a really interesting time. I think when I joined, the company was 200 million, and when I left, we're about 1 billion. So over those years, it was a really exciting journey. We had challenges like COVID, like everybody, but I think generally it was a rocket ship. And then after I left to join a Finnish startup in display, helping them kind of figure out how to grow, and then really felt the calling back to audio. And so a year or so back, I joined ICEpower, and at ICEpower, this is quite an old company in Class D electronics, amplification design, and here I am working with them to grow up sales of this off-the-shelf products that we do in amplifiers and power supplies. So quite a varied thing, but always around audio.
Yeah, I understand now why it cannot be in a couple of words, because like a long journey already. So I know that we had some discussion about the topic of this episode, or like a title of the episode, scaling audio companies, because we didn't want to say like we can be like a greatest advisors and actually we scale companies to multi-millions, our own companies. But I think I'm still like a super cool topic, because I know that you manage like a portfolio, and and also like you are in sales and marketing, so you actually saw how companies grew and what kind of challenges both in the startup and in the larger in large companies, right? So it can be really cool conversation, and especially that I think at least in this segment of the market that I'm very passionate about, like a music production. It's obviously a very niche and way smaller market. And there is actually a lot of smaller companies. So and I think maybe sometimes I'm not sure if you have the same feeling. Maybe you can tell me, but I sometimes have this feeling that like a growth and money and sales is a little bit like a taboo subject, because we all are passionate, so it's not like how can we make more money, right? I'm not sure.
I think audio is it's a really diverse industry, and I think it's full of people that just love making better sound. They have this vision. I think there's an amazing industry show in Munich, which I think showcases this really well, the high-end audio show. I think there you have, at one end, you have global brands, with carefully orchestrated, filled halls of booths and, show people and thousands of dollars of, demo units and all those kind of things. And then if you kind of go up to the corridors, you have, sole entrepreneurs who are, pouring all of their time and effort into their version of the perfect speaker or the perfect CD player. And I think you see that across the industry, that, a lot of these well-known companies that you see today, they all started with one or two people with a great idea to do something a little bit differently. And they, some have evolved into, global brands. But I think there's still a lot that, stay close to the, the original core of how they started. I agree. It's a very, it's a diverse industry. And I think you do see that, there's a lot that chase profit. I think, that's growth and profit, and that helps you to do more products, right? It helps you to sell your product to more people. At the other end, there are those that are more driven by the, I don't know, maybe the engineering side of things or the technical side of things, and okay.
Or even, you see, I like it very much, because some people even say we are like 20 people and it's good and it's still okay. And it's like, I like actually our industry just for this reason. There is this diversity, and you don't have this, I don't know, like in Silicon Valley, that if you are not chasing, like a unicorns and become like another Amazon, there must be something wrong with you. And here, I think there is a little bit more freedom. So yeah, but I still believe that.
I think it's difficult though. I mean, I think the realities of growing is, even if you don't want to grow, your fixed costs grow anyway. So you need to find a way to continually cover those to stay in business. And I think, adding more product, adding more markets, these are all ways to do that. But I think it becomes, once you're on that journey, I think it becomes like a self-feeding circle, right? I mean, the more you grow, the more you need to sustain the business, the more you have to grow to keep the growth you have, and I think you need to invest in new products. So I think it does come naturally. I think you're right though, people have different levels of being driven by that though.
Yeah. So listen, I mean, when you mentioned that, it's just like a really required, to growth. I mean, I know that our conversation will be mostly about product management, that we are both passionate, audio product management we are passionate about, but I mean, I also, and I know you too, help startups and actually get involved in some, like advisory. And sometimes I try to like explain people why growth, even not like a super exponential growth, but I mean, a little bit of growth is actually required. And I, give them this book from Clayton Christensen, like a innovator's dilemma, right? And the idea of disruptive innovation, that actually some industries or some technologies are simply disrupted, and it can actually disrupt the entire markets. So sitting in the same, branch all the time means that, like with CD, cassettes and then CDs and then obviously streaming, of course, we are just going back to, like a physical means, but or ways to distribute music. But I mean, still sometimes like this. I mean, you work for Nokia, so you probably know it. Yeah, you experienced this yourself.
I've definitely seen like the up and down. I mean, I think the other way to think about it is, I mean, you don't necessarily need growth. Maybe what you need is like momentum, right? I think if you launch a disruptive product, and a lot of that book is really around how to expand to a broader market. But I think you could also view it from the other thing is, once you launch a product, how do you defend it? How do you stop others copying it? I think this is a lot where product management plays that role, right? I think you have the first idea, the first iteration that you put to market, whether it's software or hardware. And as soon as people see it, everybody gets the idea of what you're trying to do. And I think you need to continue to find ways to maintain that differentiation, that uniqueness with your product, right? And it could be adding features, it could be moving to different price points, it can be lots of different things, but you need to keep that movement forward compared to your competition.
That's true. Yeah, so here comes the product management, right? And actually if I can just still go back to like the previous one. I mean, when I talk to Clayton Christensen, I also use sometimes this analogy of S-curve, the idea that one technology is actually like completely replaced by another, right? And this is where when the disruption happens, and very often some people, I mean, they're just so focused on what they are or what they are doing that they may not even see that the disruption is actually being done, especially by smaller companies, startups, right? That they are more agile and they just like can, I mean, with AI, I mean, Nokia it happened to Nokia, but also very often say that AI can be. I think,
I mean, Nokia is a good example. I think everybody has their opinion. I think fundamentally there's a product management example there. I think, effectively there started to be a disconnect between the problems people had with the product and how you would solve that problem. Like, I think, there was a lot of talk about touchscreen, but I think that alone wasn't the pain point. There was, the customer actually to to mobile providers is actually the operators, right? I think, people forget that they're between the mobile manufacturer and the end consumer. And a big part of the buying journey in a lot of the large markets is actually the experience with the mobile operator.
Interesting.
And I think some of the innovation that Apple did, or disruption, was also, around that, which allowed them to do more, move faster. So I think it's often there's a lot of, and I think this applies in a lot of areas. You see, a lot of looking at the actual product itself, but often it's the channel or the value proposition around the product, which can also, create an opportunity for you compared to what's there.
Yeah, and you are actually beautifully paving the way to talk about the product management, because all these like features and actually like a business model and channels is not just like a sales, marketing, etc. It's somebody just orchestrating this, So generally speaking, the role of product manager, right, in the company.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's, as a role, having this bridge between, the market, the customer, the need, the technology, the competition, someone wearing that hat is crucial for any company. I think like the Nokia example also brings, some questions more around, corporate strategy and how you choose to invest. I think the bigger you get, the slower it is to turn the tanker around once it's set on a course. Smaller companies can do that in a much more agile way.
True. But the corporate strategy also, I can see that many companies, and I know that, how to say this? I'm just trying to say is that even in the large companies who have this, who are like a product focus, or like they are just the product are in the center of their attention, they have a corporate officer, or corporate, I don't use this word, but the chief product officer, so somebody who is actually in charge of the product strategy, and he's really like in the senior position or like an executive position on the board, so he can actually influence the corporate strategy by saying, hey, this is what market is telling us, this is what competition does, this is the technology where it lies. And I can see like a lot of audio companies in different segments, they do have, head of product, or like a VP of product, or like a CPO, right? And some of them were, already on this podcast, talking how they actually approve the product strategy. But on the other hand, I can also see that there are some companies that, when these product people are, let's say some, and I know we had quite a long discussion about where this function should be in the organization, right? But I can see that that I'm not sure what you think about it, right? That the placement of the role.
I think, as the company grows, you need different levels of product management, right? I think if you have you're working within, pro audio, I don't know, let's take, an industry that I work in currently, but, professional audio, you need to make sure that you have a range of products which, meets the needs of the customers or the consumers in your market. At the same time, I think as a company level, you need to have someone thinking about, is pro audio the right market for our technology? Is the way we used to sell these products the way we're going to sell them in future? Is maybe selling a software with hardware as a license, or maybe, we make our money on installation and we give the hardware away free. I think just thinking about the overall market for how the product gets, delivered or installed or used, I think in any industry, there's opportunities to innovate there as well. And I think it's important that product management always sits at a point where it can steer this thinking to the right direction. So I think, if it's an individual product manager, their accountability is to, deliver the P&L on a product level. I think they need to be sitting at a place in an organization where they have influence over, the R&D, get input from sales. They work with marketing, but they're reporting to the management team. Obviously, the bigger the portfolio, the more businesses it crosses. I think the more senior this role needs to be, to move beyond the influence of the other areas, right? They need to be accountable for the product.
Yeah, but can we just we just naturally, since we talked about Nokia and other large companies, we already spoke, where or what product management should do. But what's your thinking about when actually in the, let's say, company stage, or let's say growth stage, when actually to hire a first product manager, so initially I think, the first product manager, it's, the founder, right? And probably CEO or this person who is a vision of the product.
I mean, I think I've worked with a few smaller companies, and I think even within larger companies, working in incubators, you see the same behavior, right? But I think in the beginning, you have one idea, you've identified some kind of opportunity, some gap, some product disruption. You, the founders, the people you hire, the primary focus really is to get this thing out the door. You're talking all the time to your customers. You are your sales team, you're your technical support, and I think for me, I think when you first launch that product, if it hits, then you're kind of in reactive mode, that you can go around and you can try and sell this thing. There's a positive reaction, and that kind of leads to sparks of other ideas. So almost you're then reacting to opportunities, and you're trying to kind of to choose which ones are important to you. I think the more you grow, you have more sales, they're bringing in more ideas, more opportunities with customers. Maybe it's adjacent to the product category you're in. Maybe it's a bigger, a smaller one, a faster one, a pink one, whatever. All of these things take they take effort, and then you have the same core team. The same core team starts working on these variants. But I think what starts to happen is you lose this visibility to the future in the market, right? You stop having someone who is spending their time thinking about what's next. And so I think you need to start bringing on product management when you lose the bandwidth to be strategic, right? And I think in sales, it's the same. I mean, you have, once you're at a certain size, there'll always be people wanting to work with you. There'll always be inquiries and opportunities about the product. But if you only react to what people want, you kind of lose this viewpoint of, where do you need to focus to drive the growth? And I think with product management, it's the same thing. You need to make sure that you're having someone carve out time, like whatever it is, 10, 15, 20% of their time to be thinking about the next generation of product, the version 2, the portfolio, how all these things fit together, and then put kind of together with sales, put together some kind of framework for how you evaluate opportunities. I think there's always, you always need cash, so you always need to kind of have the deals coming in. But I think you also need to be building, platforms or solutions which can hit a large number of these opportunities with one engineering effort, rather than having to, if you wait for people to come to you, you have to engineer 7 or 8 different engineering problems for the same business. So I think platforms and scaling, I think, are where product managers in startups can really start to help. You can start to see, what could address 70% of these opportunities. What would be the product? What would be the platform that would help us, scale? Because I think, you run out of bandwidth all the way across the organization really quickly if you're trying to do a large number of different things, right? I think it's a lot easier to do a fewer number of things that you can repeatedly sell. And I think that principle applies to, software or hardware. I'm in B2B, right? We have the same approach. We want to look at the market and build a hardware and software platform that will serve the largest number of customers, give them a competitive product. But we want to do it in such a way where we can, be efficient in how we need to customize. So we don't want to be writing a complete code stack for every product. We just want to be, changing the color of the UI and tweaking on a few features. So I think it's a big part of when product management in a startup is about looking for those platforms or, to build upon, basically.
Interesting. I mean, I can see that even some very big, companies or even corporations sometimes lack this say platform approach, right? And they just do try to solve every single problem of every customer and lack this corporate, say product strategy, right? Or mostly product strategy, right? So having grouping the products into portfolios or solutions, as you call it, right? Or platforms.
Yeah, I think, there was I think the PC versus Mac was a good example of that at one point. I think the PC laptop would have every connector, every expandability, everything customizable, right? The options were unlimited, right? And then you had the Mac where it's pretty bolted down. You got what you got, but actually that served a huge percentage of the market really well. And the other side had lots of variants, very targeted, very small sales to a large number of people. And I think, product management, certainly in consumer electronics, has evolved a lot over the last 20 years. I think there are fewer brands just putting out product with their name on. I think there is a case of certainly in audio, you have to, the product has to be, how do I say it without trampling? You have to sound good, right? Versus the price that you're paying. I think there's partners that you can work with to help you make them, but you really need to think about how you're going to differentiate, right? And I think there's been recently some really good examples of where technology makes it hard to do that, which is maybe true wireless stereo. That was a headphone market where it started off with great potential, but then it became a race for the bottom on cost, and effectively it became primarily an accessory for the smartphone. So whatever smartphone you buy, the best experience is with the connectivity with the headphones for that brand. And I think Apple with the quick pairing, the quick startup, a lot of engineering invested into those products though. They really from a product management perspective took the quality, the performance lead. It was very hard for anybody else to really come up with a way, and you saw more companies leaning into brand and what the brand stood for rather than the technology. It was hard to differentiate, I think, on technology alone.
Interesting you say that. I'm not sure, I honestly say that I don't follow that much the consumer side of the markets, so I don't know this, and I don't think about it that much, but I hear what you're saying. But listen, if I can just step back again, you mentioned, because I'm just, think in kind of a linear way. So, okay, the startup, a market fit, then you actually you're out of bandwidth, like you've mentioned, right? As a funder, and you need to have somebody who can think, about the next step. So you are actually hiring first product manager. And do you, so if you are to advise funders, where in the organization, let's imagine that it's not 2 or 3 people, because this is in such case, let's say putting a person in this, in the org structure doesn't matter that much. We are still a super small team that everybody work together. But let's imagine that you have already some marketing and sales, maybe some UX, some industrial designer for hardware. So where would you advise to put a product management role?
I think in a smaller company, I think it's also, you need to think about the profile of the person. I think if you're hiring someone into a culture where you've had, strong leaders or strong opinions on what the product should be, you need someone who is equally strong, who can, defend their corner and their viewpoint. I think ideally, sitting separate to R&D and sales. I think, in most, I've worked with, hardware companies a lot and software companies. And I think, the early products are very much led by the engineering leadership. They come from a very tech place. And then at the other end, you have, the sales team, knocking on the door all the time with these amazing things that, will lead to millions. So you need this balance of someone in the middle who can, do the investment. You need to convert those sales opportunities. You need to use the tech team to build you the platforms. But there needs to be some filter, some data, some structure to how you're deciding and how you're looking to invest. And I think for me, that's it. Product management is a separate function that you need to kind of let breathe beyond those parts of the organization.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I was hoping you're gonna say, because as you know, I had this story that I was working as a head of product, but actually on the engineering side, and I was like reporting to CTO, and actually it wasn't a small company. It was already 300 people. So obviously like a board, we actually went public. So there was actually another, complication, but it was already like enough, like interaction and let's say personal in dynamics. So it actually prevented me from, I wasn't part, for example, of the board meetings. I mean, we obviously have this like all leaders being in the same long meeting every Friday. So we obviously had some kind of conversation with sales, marketing, R&D, but there was very often, I wasn't part of this. And it's not that I even wanted. I mean, I was happy not to be in part of the board, but but I mean, it led to certain tension, and actually that made me leave the company, because I say, hey, I mean, I just need to be in the middle, and I'm just leaded like some kind of extension of R&D and like a lead engineer, which by the way I could not be, because I'm not my marketing is my major. So
I think you often see that the role is turned into more of a process delivery role. Like your job is to do the marketing material, it's to do the user guides, it's to do is to make sure that everything is in place. But for me, that's like part of the role. I think like the real value comes from, the market insight and having somebody who can help you make the right trade-offs in the product, while it's going forward, and really has a strong vision of where it can sit. And I think, you're always going to have conflicts, I think, in companies, no matter where you put this role. I think there will be, there's always opinions, and it's valid to take those in. But ultimately someone needs to be accountable for the product success. I think, what often happens is, the product manager is steered, or forced, you could put it another way, to do things a certain way. But is still expected to be accountable for the product. And I think that's where it starts to get, when you start deviating from the market data, or you start deviating too much from what the customers want, or what your competitors are doing. Flip side of that, that's often where innovative people, CTO level, can come up with disruptive ideas. So you need to also find a way to support those as well. But it is a negotiation role, though. I think you have to be somebody who can articulate well your justification for doing things, to the management team, or your leadership team. But you also have to, you have to be able to adapt based on, constraints or inputs that are given to you. So I think, a level of diplomacy is always good.
Good point. Very good point. If I can just also say, mostly to the listeners, that, we're just talking, like referring to some books like Disrupt, the Innovator's Dilemma, or so I'll just put them all. They're all in the description of the episode. So people, you can, if you just want to like read and find out, or like S-curve, also this idea of the, when technology, cycle is actually ending, and other technologies like taking over. So I'll just like put, not will, once you're listening, they're already in, down there. And I what I wanted to say is I love very much that you're talking about this, idea of platform, and actually trying to, how to say, like group those opportunities into some kind of, way to move forward and make these trade-offs. And it's honestly, I have to say that product strategy is always this kind of vague word. And I was working in product management for such a long time, but if somebody asks me what is actually a product strategy, it's always like, very often people just like start like blah, 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 blah,
Nokia was a good learning school, right? That was a massive company, and, there was a huge organization focused on platforms. And really, this covered everything from, a microphone. So, actual projects could only choose from like an approved list of microphones. right? And that means that you have a whole team that is designing something which is cost effective, it's reliable, it has the interfaces, it has the the control that can be used by all these projects, and they're really looking for like the economies of scale. And I think whether it's a software company, how you build your architecture, that it's more flexible, that you can you can build more products on top of it without having to kind of go right down to the basement to kind of to make changes, that you become you start separating how you build the code, right? You have the operating system at the core, and then you build on top of the application. Like I think this is a really, maybe it's a luxury, there's a certain size where you have to be reactive, you just have to take the opportunity. But I think if you have this in your mind, like how can, there's this thing in front of me, but there's 3 ways I could do it. Option 1 is the cheapest and the quickest, but option 2 is a bit more expensive, but this would also be reusable on this kind of product or that kind of product. I think seeing those opportunities where you give yourself options to reuse what you've built, I think that's where it comes from. And I think there's also, I think at like consumer product level, consumers have choices. I think on B2B and where I spent a lot of my time, you need to steer options or customers towards what you have, and you can do that by going out with platforms or ideas or market insights. Even if you're only 60% of the way there in your thinking, you still can bring them along for the journey and start steering them towards the solution you have. They benefit, that they don't have to reinvent the wheel. You're already kind of a lot of the way there. You've thought through a lot of the market problems. You've thought through a lot of the how they can scale up other products. So I think selling, and it also becomes easier because then you have a product that has a wider potential. And so you can potentially get more opportunities from the same thing. So the more flexible, the more, the wider your base is, the more markets the more customers you have the potential to sell it to as well.
I mean, actually, I get thinking about it, and I'm not sure I understand what you mean, because I thought that actually you're gonna be a bit, when this solution, it's not like a, like a modularized, or like it's not made of platforms, you have actually more flexibility because you can theoretically, right, build anything, and you have components, then you are actually limited a little bit. So I'm not, how do you how
I mean, I think like I think when you've built components, I'll be honest, like my software knowledge is not as strong as yours, but if I can steer to the hardware side, that's definitely stronger. There's an investment of time and quality and testing in any module that you build, right? And in theory, you can go back and you can redesign anything. If you think on the software side, I mean, pretty much you're choosing your operating system and then maybe your chipset, right? I don't know, like if it's an embedded product, maybe you choose NXP, right? That runs on Linux. So, there's a lot of work though still to do in building the product around that core chipset, right? You need whatever other hardware you need around it, the drivers, the logic, how all of those work together. You need to build all the reliability for that. And I think, how wide you make that base, I think that's always like a key decision of product management. Like, do you add every feature under the sun? Do you add every hardware component to your platform? Or do you narrow it in and try? I think that's the platform itself, I think is a huge part of product management. And I'm trying to be very general. So maybe we go to something more specific, but if you were to think of a Wi-Fi loudspeaker, technology provider, right? I mean, I think if you want to go and sell your Wi-Fi chip to, audio companies all around the world, your product manager needs to make sure that chip has it has the speed, it has the power consumption, it has the, all of the GPIOs, all of the interfaces, all of the controls that anyone would need. But you're just selling that chip, right? So then the next you make sure that you're going to hit 80% of the market you want to go to with that chip. But then as you go up the stack, then someone has to either build that into a product or build that into a platform. So ODMs are a big part of consumer electronics or electronics. They're going to build a reference design around that chip, right? So what software, what firmware do they build out around that? Maybe they target low cost and I don't know, like 2-channel and, 1 HDMI, I'm using as an example, right? And yes, it's possible to add 15 HDMI and it's possible to add 13 channels, but then that's not something they have in the core platform and that's something they have to customize. So I think in the audio industry, like understanding the technology stack and how these products are going to end up in your product, you will come across lots of different product managers and lots of different product management choices. But I think also as a product manager thinking about how to build your product, you need to pick these blocks and kind of figure out what's the best platform for your products. Like if you're a brand, do you pick one platform, you build your software, your app on top of it, and then you use the same one across all products? Can you do that for cost? So maybe I'm rambling a little bit, but I think it's product management is all about, I think, trying to keep as many doors open as possible within the target that you have. That's from a technology B2B side. That's kind of how we think about it.
What I wanted to say is that, as you know, I'm also I'm not so fan, it's a bad word, but I mean, I always a big advocate of like a portfolio management. And I mean, I try to teach people to think in terms of platforms, or even as a product manager, make decisions where you invest a little bit time into platforms. But can you maybe to the listeners say, I know we already touched this a little bit, right? Building, let's say blocks, right? But I mean, some examples of platforms, so how you would if you were just have a first product, and how would, let's say a microphone, right? So, what would be like a platform, like any other.
I mean, I think like a big one is maybe around Bluetooth, right? So I think a lot of, headphone speakers, they all use the same, or there's a few different manufacturers that will make the Bluetooth chip. I think if you want to develop DSP or tuning on top of that, right, you want to embed your own algorithms. This is software work. So selecting a platform for a Bluetooth provider, like that would be one choice that you could use across lots of different products.
Okay, but you're saying right now to about a supply. So actually, what platform? So what kind of fundamentals, to sort of to choose, and what kind of supplier, right, to choose. But I mean, I think, do you also think about platforms in terms of your own investments? So what kind of how to let's say modularize your technology, so your own technology can be reused, in the in multiple products, right, or multiple solutions.
Yeah, I mean, I think at a product level, I think designing something that can be. I'm thinking of very specific examples in my head now, right? But I think you need to always have at a product level a really good understanding of the target application and the customer or the segment that you're going for. I think at a product level, if you're selling B2B, that still applies, right? I think you want to be able to reuse investments on technology or time across multiple products. Like ideally you can reuse what you've done in different products. And I think that's why on the Bluetooth chip, that's one example. That's something that takes a lot of time, a lot of effort to do one. And once you've done it, then that's something that you could reuse across a lot of others. You could equally, choose to use a more powerful different one, and maybe for a specific product that would be the right thing to do. And I think there's often the product portfolio is really about making sure that you have the right targeted product in every segment of the the market, or depending on how your portfolio is divided up. I'm not saying you have to have common components across everything in your portfolio. Everything there can be a completely unique product, right? I mean, it can be a full ground up engineering effort for each one if that's what you need to succeed. But I think in general, there is always a desire to seek commonality as much as possible.
100%. I mean, it reminded me of actually my previous company. We actually built a initially it was like a test automation. So like a very nice technologies how you can read the interface, so you can test test the products, like a software products very easily, because it just grabbed everything from your interface. But then we learned, and I mean, it's obviously particularly interesting for audio companies, because like desktop applications like those, they are all so it's not like in browser, so you can just grab all the information, but I need to have a very reliable technology that can read like a user's behavior from the interface. Of course, mostly for analytics, and that's what we learned, that the technology created for testing is actually a beautiful platform, and we like nourish and and actually think in terms of how can we leverage into like a new product. We created a completely new product line. It was like a very tough, because we never been to like analytics market, but it ended up actually also like a crossing like 1 million. I mean, I'm not in the company anymore, but I mean, I heard that it's actually doing pretty well right now. So it was actually exactly like you say, like leveraging existing technology and into creating either a new product or maybe even like an entire new product line, right? And
I think that often happens. I think the challenge there is often, I think, like software is often easier, but making the product is pretty easy. I think, or that's maybe flippant, but selling it is also quite hard, right? I think from a technology side, often there are these adjacent markets or these adjacent applications where you could use it, but then actually, how do you reach those customers and convince them? I think that's often the harder part. And I think you see that often with audio brands trying to enter new categories because they can, but then they find that the channel is completely different. They don't have any experience there. They don't have any contacts, and it's much slower or much harder than they thought. So I always think a big part of product management is also working with marketing to figure out like how you're going to sell it. And then I think also, a key partner is sales in, getting the feedback, can they sell it? Does this fit with the channel we have? Would we need to build a new channel? How much would that cost? I think that's also a key part of the decision-making process.
Right. Andrew, just if I can just like stop for just a second and, like remind our listeners that they can follow our podcast on all streaming platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and others, and obviously on YouTube. You can just type Audio Products Podcast and you'll find us very easily. We also have a Discord server. Later in the podcast, I'll also like displayed QR code. So if you're like listening on YouTube, you can just simply scan the code and get there. It's called Audio Product Academy, and there are people from audio product managers, designers, generally people who build products and love building products there. And also, finally, we have this small Buy Me a Coffee page. It's something like Patronite, where people can, make small donation to our podcast. Well, actually, it's not a donation in reality, because we also publish there some unpublished videos and additional blog posts, etc. So it's just some additional content, I would say, like a premium supporters of the podcast. So if you find our conversations valuable, I mean, I would be super grateful. As you know, the podcast is free, and it will be still free. And an idea is to grow it and invite great people like Andrew. So if you could like give us small donation, or like even subscribe and get this premium content, will be very, very happy. And with this said, coming back to it's always like a sort, takes me off the track, a little bit from what we are talking about. I just wanted, so we went into the portfolio management. But I just wanted to say, I mean, I have to say that, I mean, and I know you probably will agree with me 100% that the interesting part in the, let's say, product management role is that you, especially the small companies or like a growing companies, is that founders are still very active. And sometimes I at least I saw that in many, and I was also guilty of it too, that you come and you say, hey, you know, what they're doing, this just sounds a little bit chaotic, etc. But actually, you know, how to say that? Sometimes founders of the, and I actually had my own startup as well, and it failed. But I mean, I look at these things from the other side too, and that they seem sometimes a little bit chaotic. But I mean, there is a certain, I don't know. The company is there for the reason because they have, I don't know, great intuition, or I don't know, some kind of, you know, like a unique perspective that make the company successful. And it's very important not to forget that you're not just like a replacing a founder. You have to help him. Maybe sometimes somehow structure his, you know, like a super creative mind, or help him to make, you know, this trade-off, like you say. But I think, you know, you already mentioned this kind of, how do you call it?
I mean, I think it's it's an interesting one. As I said, I think in the beginning there is a close proximity to the customer, the idea, the technology, and I think day by day there's an inherent prioritization of like what you work on, and then I think the product manager and the founder in the early days, I think they have to work very closely together. I think the getting the buy-in or the support of the direction that's needed to go, I think is really important. And I think the way to think about it is like where is the activities that the founder has got now less time to work on. So I don't think it's like a capability discussion, it's a time issue. And I think when you start developing the product, I think anyone involved around technology is looking internally. They're working with suppliers, they're working on the deadlines, problems, and they're spending less time getting feedback from customers. That's the sales team managing that's others. And so I think the product manager in the beginning maybe starts by augmenting, sitting down and discussing what do we need to make a successful next product. What information don't you have? How can I build that picture to kind of augment what you do have? Because likely the CTO may have like a really good, vision on the technology evolution or the feature set or something, but maybe doesn't understand how their customers are planning to use the product in the future. I think the CTO should stay close to this, but I think that's it's easier said than done when it's hectic and you're trying to keep things moving.
Yep, absolutely. No, I'm just saying because I noticed some, and I was actually a bit guilty too, so especially that the founder of the company I work with, seemed like a bit crazy creative person, and he was still very close to the market. But I mean, I felt like initially that maybe I know better, and instead of actually building like this, collaborative, like build a bridge between us and hey, how can we sort of help each other, or like how can I help you because this is his company. But I mean, I had this kind of mindset that I know better, and I think it's not a like a best. I mean, maybe if sometimes I did.
I think you have to. I think like where I can talk about where I work now. Like ICEpower has 2 CTOs. The role is divided. We do amplifiers and power supplies, so we kind of split it that way. And they both spend a lot of time going out to visit customers, to sit down, to join sales calls, to understand what's happening. And at the same time, we've hired more people, so there is kind of R&D leadership. There are very capable people who are driving the everyday projects. And I think this is something where we get the best of both worlds. We get the feedback from the market, but it's also a great way because I think the when you have people who are developing products for the market, they can also spot opportunities in terms of the problems that, what's being asked, or why are you asking that? Why do you think you need that? Have you thought about doing that? And I think in heavily technology fields, I feel it's important that you still get the leadership team out talking to customers.
But you see, you're talking about CTO, right? Not CEO.
Yeah, CTO. Yeah, I think it's obviously the CEO manages his relationships as well, or her. In my case, it's a he, so I'm not doing that. But I think it is really important, and I think you do often see senior team disappear into the background, and the interface to the market and the customers becomes more and more lower down in the organization. But I think companies that are successful, you generally still see that the leadership team is still keeping that link. And I think product management has to coexist with that, right? I mean, those short meetings are data points in a market study, but they need to form part of a larger picture, right? And I think product management is really to take away the extremities of these viewpoints, right? I mean, if you have one or two people talking to 3 or 4 customers a week versus a product manager doing surveys, out meeting 20 to 30 different customers, and the scale of the data becomes bigger, and I think then it's easier to kind of guide these more sporadic feedbacks that you get from customers at more senior meetings. So I think to me it's about also having this market intelligence, like someone who really understands the market that you're in. And I think product management as a role or as a job, I mean, it can be half of somebody's time, right? But it's about carving out time to do this task. And I think that's something that when you have deliverables and you have, problems and schedules and things, it's the first thing that gets cut. But then I think after, 1 or 2 years, you find yourself that our products are old. We need to start looking at them. And then it takes you a year or so to figure out, what it is that you need to do. So, and I think, I've seen that across the industry, right? I think all across my career, it's the same thing. And at some point it always works when there is a group, there is a role, there is someone who is given the time to analyze and assess where we are, what the market's doing, what it needs, have that kind of reset point. But that's maybe quite dramatic. I think if it's a continual exercise, then it becomes easier to manage and plan.
Yeah, you see, there is actually there is a interesting article I mentioned to you. I mean, it's a business consultant that has nothing to do with audio. His name is Sinse. I believe I pronounce his name correctly.
Yeah.
And he actually wrote this interesting article, how to, or when and how to implement product management into a startup. And actually, an interesting point he's making in this article that, you mentioned this already, but I just wanted to, maybe add additional reading, is that depending on the founders' capabilities or their, talents and, a strong, their sort of, how do I say that, their talents, the product manager should complement them in a specific way. So if you have a more like a visionary type of CEO, like, I don't know, Steve Jobs kind of person, so then obviously it's very bad to have another like a product manager who is a visionary, because this could be a clash, so the person must be more like a, great in organizing things and, more like a project management, like a great coordinator, so he can talk to sales and R&D and maybe do this kind of, how to say, portfolio. So like put a little bit of structure into this, like a visionary mind of the CEO. And actually there is the opposite situation. There are sometimes CEOs who are more like like a finance type of people who love data and love like looking into Excel sheets. And they very often, I saw this actually in real life, that when they hire like a visionary product managers and give them freedom, these people really become like a typical CEO of a product, right? Because they grew this, like a growth of the company, I mean, to the crazy levels. But just because, they just manage the business more like a business administration, and they gave the, like a true freedom.
I think it's a super interesting point, and I think it also leads on a lot to culture and like how you define and you split roles in a startup. I don't think there is one size fits all, but I think, you touched on it before, you need people to work together and get on, like the personalities, the nature of the people has to fit, right? I think that's one. They have to get their energy from working there and with these other people. And then I think you need good leaders in founders. And I think it sounds, I mean, consultants love writing these things, right? It sounds really easy to say, hey, admit you're bad in 5 areas and hire someone to do it, right? But actually it takes quite a strong personality, a strong leader to admit, to an organization that you lack in a certain area and that you're willing to delegate. And I think often that's, that is often the difference between success of teams and failure of teams. Like when you can have somebody who can create space and, defer or delegate well, I think that's effectively what you need to give, a creative product manager the space.
Absolutely.
And I think these things start to fail. I talked earlier about giving them the accountability, right? But it's the same thing. It's about trusting them and delegating this responsibility to them, that they're going to, they're going to create the best product. Now, clearly, if you're a founder, it's your company, it's your legacy, you can overrule them. But I think, this is something where how you do that, like how you approach the feedback, how you approach this topic, I think we've all read the same horror stories of, aggressive CEOs or, shaming or these things. So to me, product management, where it fits, how it fits, what the role is, I think also, ensuring the person is a good fit is also a key part of it as well. Like I talked about the diplomacy earlier. I think it's all the same trend, right? You need to complement both from a capability and a personality viewpoint.
Absolutely. By the way, to the listeners, you can see right now, to those who are actually watch, not listen. So there's actually, the code, this is actually our Discord server, so, or if you watch on YouTube or on a social medium, right? So you can actually scan and actually get to our community. But yeah, I mean, this is what happened to me, with the startup. So actually we managed to build a tool and actually acquire first customers. And I think we got to like a market fit, but I mean, they were like we didn't get along very well. And I have to say that I was also a little bit like big-headed and, force my own decisions, but it was actually 3 or 4 people with, big egos. And it actually, taught me very well to be humble, because we just lost a lot of money. And the funny thing is I just finally ended up with having a product and clients and, no team. Not just because I was such a, like an aggressive CEO, not to, but I mean, actually there was other people who didn't get along very well and say, okay, I don't want to do it. Okay, so guys, I'm just leaving. And I ended up, I want to still do it, right? But I mean, the engineering team left, like a UX designer actually went someplace else. And, that was actually, so yeah, like you say, I think it's the saying from, I think Druckner said that, like the culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? So if people don't get along very well, you can have the great product and
I think when it comes to start up, the product is such an important part of the culture. And I think, at a very simple level, you can all sit down and say, hey, we're gonna make a headphone, right? We're gonna make the best headphone. But actually, when you dig down into it, what do people mean by that? Like, do we mean, we're going to invest hundreds of thousands to make sure it's the most reliable headphone? Are we going to be the cheapest? Are we going to, do we care if it breaks after a year? Do we want to, I think the attributes of the product and how that links to people's values and ethics, I think you don't learn that until you start working with people.
Oh, yeah.
So I think having those, what is a successful company? Like what I think, there's a lot of these jokes about values and what is the mission but I think if you have a group of people, it's an interesting exercise to sit down and to do those, because I think it forces a lot of topics to the surface. Are we customer focused? Are we customer first, or are we, profit first? Right. I think, okay, that's maybe an extreme example, but like I've sat in those discussions and it's very interesting to see. You learn a lot about how people value success and how people value a good product, going through some of those things. So I think there are tools you can use to kind of also like build teams to make great products.
I mean, 100%, couldn't agree more. And, we can definitely see maybe a little bit less in the audio space but I mean, generally, I mean, how to say, it's probably clear to anybody who watched the podcast that, I mean, very often I sort of talk about the, Silicon Valley values that I not necessarily agree. And I just like a look at some companies do. I mean, I simply cannot understand. Once again, I mean, I'm not saying that my values have to follow everywhere, but I mean, it's just like profit first. It looks like some people are completely profit first, and they can just pollute, and well, I mean, even maybe it's a.
I think that's maybe also like a wider topic about certain countries and their approach to how they reward and how you look after yourself. But I think culturally entrepreneurialism is very strong in the US, and I think the positive aspect of that is that there is a really excellent capability when it comes to product definition and targeting the market and understanding what it takes to make a successful product. I think you have an ecosystem there where you can learn from amazing people. Like I think the access that you have to mentors and peers who can help you is super strong. And similarly, I think when you look at some of the, I'm going to say this, but I'm going to struggle to think of an answer, right? But they've been able to look and find this pain point and to disrupt so many different industries and markets, right? And
Absolutely.
Yes, there are others from all around the world, but as like percentage coming out of a certain area, you can't doubt that there is this, real focus on understanding what disruption is, looking for opportunities to disrupt. And it's a continual, people fly or relocate from all around the world to be there because it's such an incubator.
Yes, I wanted to say that we have actually a lot of conversation. Tomasz, my good friend from Poznań, who actually built Zilia microphone company, he says, it's just thinking actually, discussing sometimes, sorry, what could be like a interesting new project, to build, but say, hey, I mean, start companies in US, I mean, from the very beginning. And there's actually, I know you probably know, like 11 Labs, I think, the name of the companies, like this AI.
Which one's right?
11 Labs. That's the name. I think that's. I mean, let me just. I think I'm not that much into AI. 11. Yeah, 11 Labs. Yeah. So voiceover AI voiceover, and actually they grew like a super fast. It's actually like I would say Polish company. It's already a US company right now because they just like relocated to US and they have access to the capital and mentors, and it wouldn't be possible in here. And I have to still say that Poland is not the worst in terms of bureaucracy comparing to some European countries. If I just look at Germany, for example, I'm just like is it really possible to build a company anymore? I mean, there is just so I can see that. Yeah, but I mean, still, that's interesting subject.
I mean, I think
like values, growth, and.
But I think it's I think product management is also, that was the subject of today and like what you need, but like having this network, and how you build that, I think that's also, an important part. Like, I think you can build a network with customers. I think within industry associations, or there is ways to kind of to get data and information, but like that's a key part of building the picture of where you want to go. And I think getting out there, talking to people. I think even in Germany, there's probably help that you can get to steer your product, right? I think.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't also sound so like a laugh at Germany, but I mean, obviously, like entrepreneurship and bureaucracy don't go along very well. By the way, funny thing is that now when you mentioned about the US and actually how many markets they disrupted, etc. I mean, I learned everything about the product management from the US Association, PDMA. Actually, my first mentor was actually like an American. I mean, he was like a Belarusian who moved to US and lived in Michigan like 30 years ago, and he told me, hey, I was actually struggling to get some like some reliable source of knowledge, and found Product Development Management Association, just to learn that this is actually founded in 1976. Yeah, so it's like a 50 years. And I'm just laughing because so many people right now get so crazy, passionate about product management. I say, hey, and especially with software, because I was always mostly in software, people say, hey, there's this new great domain like product management that, was sort of like a built around software and software companies. I say, guys, you are actually, you are crazy. This, like product management has like 50 years, and it was actually, started way before we had the internet, right? And
yeah, I remember actually at Microsoft we had training on, I think it was from a company in the US called Pragmatic Marketing, but they gave kind of like a lot of, I think we did like strategic product management and those kind of things. So it was, I think it's at the forefront of like a lot of the industry thinking, and has been for a long time. So it's, it's you can't get away from it.
Yeah. Listen, I mean, I know we'll be slowly getting to an end, but I mean, I just wanted to ask you, related to the, still to the to product management. So, what are the like a you're say that? Sorry, I just like got a little bit like distracted. I'm trying to say. You already mentioned that that some of these small companies, like startups, they have this, they do the mistake that they just like are very reactive, right? So they simply chase every opportunity. Do you also see like any other like mistakes that, like a product management wise or like a sales marketing wise that, the companies when they grow, they do?
I don't know. I think it's hard to generalize. I did some coaching with the university on, some of their IP startups. I've worked at a couple. I think the key one for me is kind of, keeping this strategic versus reactive when it comes to, where you're looking. And I think it's easier said than done because, you have to keep the lights on, right? And I think you have to kind of keep things rolling in. But I think that's definitely somewhere where, allowing someone else in the company to help with, thinking about what are the next products, to be looking beyond the sales pipeline, what is the next wave of products, understand. And I think I've seen that sales can do this, but it takes I think you need a certain personality type who is able to calmly, analyze the market. It's quite you need time to do it well. And I think often the task is given to people and then the answer you get back is, what's right in front of you, or, what's the next opportunity, or, what you already know. But I think, great product management or great product ideas generally come with an insight or an opportunity that wasn't seen before, or a framing that was, thought of a bit differently. And that takes a bit of time. So I think I think I'm not saying that every startup should, the first hire should be a product manager, but I think you really need to think about who is looking at the market you're in and who is making sure that you're steering the ship in the right direction versus your competitors, versus technology, versus whatever other trends are around you. And if that's you're the founder and you're doing that, then make sure that you're giving some of your time, whether it's your Sunday afternoon to read and look around what's going, whether it's going to industry shows and keeping an afternoon to walk around and talk with your competition, or look at what's happening. I think you have to make sure you're present and aware in the market that you're competing in. I think that's someone needs to be doing that.
Yeah. Got it. Listen, I was very passionate when you reached out, because I think it was I don't want to say completely, but I mean, the first person who has such a big, like a focus on these, platforms and, portfolios. And, I mean, the reason I say this, and I'm going to be a bit selfish right now, is that I actually found this so important that I even created the class, which is called audio product portfolio management, that I host these workshops from time to time. Actually, I don't do this alone anymore, because I invited like an experienced entrepreneur who built company from ground up, actually hardware company, mics, and there's also plugins. So it's actually like a solutions, right? Multiple products and software, and actually specifically to help people. I mean, it's not only product managers, but I mean, funders, product managers, CTOs of audio companies, to learn these principles of portfolio management, because actually there are, like you say, Pragmatic Institute and PDMA. I mean, PDMA has actually in their certification the entire chapter called product portfolio management. And I was always blown away, because I know so many experienced product managers. I mean, people who can, have 10 times more experience than I have. But I mean, somehow they are just very, very good about running one managing one product. So they're just very good in discovery, market research, various, let's say, processes, and you name it. But when I actually ask people, hey, do you know what product portfolio management is? So how to manage entire portfolio of products, how to prioritize your projects, how to actually make this balanced portfolio where you have enough of investment into platforms.
Yeah.
And a little bit, some kind of processes. So you have also a cost efficiency, and you can actually have profitability of your products, not just only made by selling more, but I mean, balancing your portfolio. I couldn't find it for so long that actually I say, hey, I'm going to, based on my experience also on this, actually I have this NPDP, this, a product management certification. The only one that I found the portfolio in. So I'm also linking these workshops in the description of the episode, guys. So if you'd like to check it out, Tomasz actually teaches those classes. So come join.
It's definitely it's a good thing to do. I think, often, again, I think it's something which just takes carving out some time and to manage it as a process. I think that's a huge step in the right direction, and I think, I think you can share how, if you do this well, these two, customer reactive activities and platforms don't need to be separate things, right? It's just about timing, right? So if you can see the market, you can see the direction things are going, and you can build your platforms, before your customers are, then it's just a nice funnel that, leads all in one direction. So I think a lot of it is just about getting a little bit with platforms a little bit ahead of the market, that you can. But you can scale it across many customers, right? It's
yep. You see, I mean, there was actually one more thing that actually I just grabbed this from this actually PDMA framework, actually, but I applied it, right? As a head of product management in the previous company, I was actually I implemented the portfolio management process. So we actually sit down together with the board and the director of sales and marketing, as me and CTO and me as a head of product management. They were just really reviewing the results, financial results of our products and market trends, so we're just analyzing, is this a decline because, this is maybe market is shrinking, or maybe, also shall we start new products, so and I also so one other thing that I had, so this was my, sort of learning there, is just not only investing into platforms, but also looking at the portfolio from the risk perspective. So, I also break down products into a derivative and more innovative, so a derivative, I mean, you can make small change and repackage product and actually maybe sell it to, another segment, or make it a premium version, a more expensive, for a high-end segment of the market, and using the same platforms, right? So when you have a platform, you can make this multiple smaller extension of your portfolio, and actually being very careful about not doing too many disruptive products at the same time. Even actually, I'm curious what you think about it, because I interviewed a couple of portfolio managers saying, so how many of these great products, or a percentage wise, you think is good to have in your portfolio? And I mean, I'm curious what's your take on this. I'll share also what people told me.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would say it from another way. I think you need to be it's very easy to say small bets or small work. We can do loads of those, right? But you have a finite amount of engineering. I think you need to make sure that you have one big bet, right? I think, and whatever, whether it's one, whether it's two, that you can staff it appropriately to actually deliver on that promise. So I think I wouldn't say there's a number, but I think it's very hard to have multiple big bets going on at one time. I think you need to focus on one, and then you maybe keep the sales team happy with having a few other small iterative things in the meantime. But I think it's, keeping the focus is important. So I would kind of small as possible.
Yeah. So you see, I mean, exactly. That's exactly what I heard from people. And that's exactly what I was always telling. Hey, let's not, make too many groundbreaking projects at the same time, because they have high risk of, not succeeding. So we don't want to really go underwater, right? And looking at the cash flow, right? So yeah. And some people told me also some statistics 10-20%. So they made I even read that somewhere a 50, 30, 20. So 50, let's say, ongoing support, or new versions of existing product. 30%, a little bit of these derivative platforms. So looking a little bit of ahead, and 10-20% of big bets. Also depending on where you are, because some companies obviously have a lot of cash in the pocket, and they're just on the head of on running the wave, so they can probably spend a little bit more money, right, on groundbreaking projects, where some companies are 1-2 invoices 2 months ahead. With the, cash flow wise, right? So they cannot afford the risky projects, because they.
But I think it's a lot about the behavior around it, right? So I think having the focus from the whole organization, whether you're a small company or you're a massive organization, what's important, I think it's crucial, right? I think as soon as you divide attention, you run the risk that it's not successful. And so I think when it comes to product development and big bets, I think, you need to make sure it's well understood across the organization that this is something which needs to work. And also the priorities of those other products is clear as well. And that comes to the portfolio as well, right? So what do you wake up in the morning and do first?
Yeah. But you see, I think it's just probably that very well, right? I mean, the easier said than done, because at least I had this experience that we actually clearly communicated, and I mean, mostly with CFO we had this problem, right? That this is like a big bet, as you call it, right, or a groundbreaking project. So it's very high risk, but we cannot exactly say when it's going to click, when it's going to be first sales. But still, they're just trying to treat it as this kind of all other ongoing projects. So say there's always discussion why it's not not predictable, right? As why you are not able to tell me when we are going to have first sales and stuff like this. And it's not that because they were so greedy or etc., but I mean they were just hard time understanding that these are different types of products. And if you have already a great successful products, you cannot just simply use the same a thinking into these new bets, right? And it was actually it actually created a lot of tension in the organization, right?
Yeah. No, I think Yeah, it's tough, right? I think smaller companies generally have more things to react to around the core development, which eats up the schedule. And I think that's something which is very difficult to kind of to work around, right? I think it's very easy to sit down and write a schedule on a piece of paper, but the reality is it's, if you have finite resources and other variables happening, it's quite difficult to do.
But I think also it's the cash flow, right? I think the problem, and actually this, like a problem, like you're looking ahead and being proactive, it actually comes from the fact that larger companies actually have a better financial situation. And I think it's also like a fear of, not chasing every opportunity, right? Because how can you say, look proactively if you have money maybe for 2, 3, 4 months ahead? That's, I think.
I think you don't last very long in a big company if you deliver projects that are over budget and late. So I think even like once the project is committed, I mean, generally there's a budget, and your success as a project manager and a product owner, is to deliver with the resources you asked for. So I think it's a bit of a different game. The bigger the company, the less interruptions you should have on delivering, right? I think that's maybe kind of one thing that smaller companies have a bit more of a problem with, right? That there's less elasticity in dealing with any issues as they come along.
Yes. Yes, you say that's actually, there are different, different distractors and different reasons why people can actually be not look ahead, right? As you say. Listen, I know that I have to finish. I mean, I have so many other questions, I would just probably love to go into sales, etc. Collaboration about sales and product. You actually, had both. I mean, experience with both roles. So, but maybe if we can, someday do another episode and actually cover. You will, if you could, be so kind and join me once again.
It'd be really interesting to talk a little bit more around sales. I think that's something which. Is maybe I have, an insight when it comes to B2B and B2C. I think that will be an interesting one to talk through as well. So we can do that sometime as well.
Perfect. Andrew, thank you so much for joining, and, thank you to the listeners. And
cool. Thank you very much for the time. It was really, really enjoyable. Hopefully, if anyone has any questions, they can reach out on LinkedIn or through you. But happy to continue the conversation afterwards, maybe in Discord as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much, cool. Andrew.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to this episode. I hope you liked it. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and of course on our YouTube channel. Make sure to subscribe to it and hit the bell, because we publish a lot of interesting videos there, not just the episodes. You can also become a supporter and get premium content like additional reading, unpublished videos on our Buy Me a Coffee page, linked in the description of this episode. See you in the next one. Yo.